Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and I'm here to talk about some backlist horror. If you've been following my last few backlist videos, you might have noticed that I've been going through a bit of a reading slump when it comes to the genre. And it's not like I'm falling out of love with it, but I've just was struggling to pick up anything I enjoyed. I am happy to report that the dry spell has broken, and for the most part, I enjoyed everything that I read in this group of books, and I'm excited to tell you about it. All that being said, let's get started. First, let's talk about the Merciless Volume 4 Last Rites by Danielle Vega, and before you get nervous, don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything in the first or any of the other books in this series. This is technically a companion novel, so you could absolutely read them out of order, which is technically what I did. I've heard mixed things about this series, so I read the first one, absolutely loved it, and then I never continued on, but I wanted to do a recommendations video, so I ended up picking up the fourth book because it fit the theme. And this book is about a young college girl who back in high school had a breakdown after the suicide of her best friend. She then went to a party, did some drugs, and ended up getting into an altercation with someone else. And because of that, her parents put her in a mental institution. She spent, I want to say, a year there. And then afterwards, the story is told over two timelines, one being when she was in that mental institution, as well as afterwards when she is out and she is now going on vacation to Italy with two of her other best friends. Now, this is very much a young adult story, so you do need to know that. And so while they are touring Italy, they're doing so in a very teenage girl kind of way. They are going out and partying. There is definitely a love interest. Now, just like the first book, this one is partially focused on an exorcism and possible possession. You find out that this small town in Italy has a history where there was a woman that was sacrificed in order to have the city atone for their sins. And within that, you possibly have a modern version of that happening. So just like I gave warnings for the first book, this one is absolutely brutal. It is bloody and gruesome, and it's not going to be for everyone. If you think that young adult books are all cute and they don't really go to those dark places, this book series definitely proves that wrong. If I had a criticism of this book, it's the fact that it does follow a lot of the same beats as at least the first book in the series, and that did make it a little bit predictable, but at the same time, I kind of went into that book knowing or wanting the same experience, and I very much got that. So yeah, if you enjoyed the first book, I would definitely recommend jumping on to this one, and I think that it's a really great story for anyone who enjoys that Mean Girls narrative and wants it to go to some horror places, because this book definitely does. Next, I read a bit of a modern horror classic, and that is The Sentinel by Konvitz. This is a story of a model slash actress who moves into an apartment building where there is a priest living there who has facial deformities and is blind, and he basically sits in his window all day and watches her. This, of course, is very creepy, but otherwise the apartment building seems quite good. She begins to interact with the other residents there, who are all a little bit strange themselves, but otherwise nice. However, she is told that there is more going on in this building. I don't want to give away too much of the plot in case you haven't watched the movie or read the book yourself. But I enjoyed this one. This one was recommended to me because I loved Rosemary's Baby so much, and I'm kicking myself because I can't find the comment, so feel free to shout yourself out if you were the person that made that recommendation. I definitely can see why they made that comparison, because it's clear that this book was inspired by Rosemary's Baby. You again have a young woman moving into an apartment building with some very strange neighbors, and so the setup was very reminiscent of that. In some ways, it was almost too reminiscent. It was very clear that the author was influenced by that iconic book, but at the same time, I like that story, so it was fun to revisit it. And this book did go to different places. It's not a complete rehash, but had a really good ending. I really did enjoy it. I thought it was quite clever and definitely had a good oh damn moment for me. So if you have not read this one, I would recommend it. I'm trying to read more horror classics, and I know this one is written in, like, I believe the 70s, so it's not like an old classic, but to me, I'd still call it a classic because most of the horror that I read, if I'm honest, was published after 2000, so I like going back and actually revisiting some older pieces. And this one was very enjoyable. I did it on audio, which had a fresh young narrator who I thought fit the story really well. So I would recommend that one. I thought it was fun. After that, I read Theme Music by T. Marie Vanderlee, and this is about a woman who was the sole survivor of a terrible childhood massacre. So when she was just a baby, her father wandered into the kitchen with an axe. He chopped down her mother as well as her siblings, but for some reason left her alive. And she is left without answers. She doesn't know why that happened. She was raised by her aunt and now is an adult. And so the story starts out when she discovers that her childhood home has become available to buy. It's on the real estate market, and she is drawn to it for some reason and decides to actually buy it. However, her boyfriend is not too excited about this, and there are definitely some interpersonal conflicts that ensue. Everyone thinks she's a little bit crazy for doing this, and when she moves into the house, she begins to wonder if it is having more of an influence on her. Now, this is one of these books that I'm including in a horror wrap-up, but it definitely has elements of a mystery, suspense, thriller, all of that. It absolutely crosses genres, but I want to be clear that there is a supernatural aspect to this book because you are seeing things from her perspective that just aren't quite possible. So if you're looking for a straight up thriller, this is not it, but it definitely plays into a lot of those tropes as well as the mystery tropes, because you end up getting to have the main character trying to puzzle out what happened that day. So she gets a hold of crime scene information, old pictures, and is able to draw some conclusions, find some new evidence, and basically figure out things that happened those years ago that the police were never able to determine themselves. So if you like those detective mystery aspects, you'll find them here, but there's more going on. And as the story progresses, things just get crazier and crazier. There were a few twists and turns that I didn't love because I don't like when a story forces me to suspend my disbelief more than I want to, and things just get a little crazy. I keep using that word, but it's a really good way to describe this book. But despite that, I gotta give this book credit because I did not know what was gonna happen. I always kind of pride myself in being pretty good at predicting plots, especially when there is a thriller element to it, but I had no idea where this book was going. I was so confused, and there were so many good red herrings, and I just could not predict it at all. So if you want a really unpredictable story, one that is very entertaining, very fast paced with a lot of action and a really exciting ending, this is a good one to pick up. It was fun for sure, a little bit over the top, but at the time that was exactly what I was looking for, and I really did enjoy the experience. So I would definitely recommend that one as well, if that sounds up your alley. And finally, I want to recommend a graphic novel, and I try not to include too many in my wrap-ups because I know only a small portion of my viewers actually enjoy that format, but I enjoyed this one so much that I really wanted to talk about that. And it was volume 4 of The Ice Cream Man. And while this is volume 4, just like the first book I talked about, this is more of a companion series, so you can absolutely start here. This is a collection of horror short stories where every story is different than the last, so that's why you could absolutely start with this group of stories and not be spoiled for anything that's happened before. And they're all loosely based around a man named the Ice Cream Man, but very loosely. He just kind of makes appearances in the background of these stories, but it's really not about this creepy man himself. Instead, the author just uses it as a narrative platform to tell these really unique stories. And I think this is the best volume in this collection so far. I've been a little bit hit or miss with the last few, but this one was just so smart. There was 4 stories in it, and 3 of them I absolutely love. The other one was fine, but the other 3 were just standouts. One was about a palindrome setup where the beginning of the story to the end of the story, you could almost read it in either direction, and that just made the story so unique, and it worked incredibly well. It was clearly very well thought out by the author, and I just loved it and thought it was super clever. And then the next story is all about crossword puzzles, so the author plays a lot with language and just puzzles in general. And again, it was very clever and just felt very smart. And the last story was absolutely crazy. It's about a single father who ends up reading his daughter's diaries, and he realizes that she is becoming sexually active, and he's not very comfortable with that. But unfortunately, he doesn't really have a good way to deal with it, because how do you tell your teenage daughter that you have broken her trust and read her diary? And he continues to read it, and things get crazier and crazier, and oh my goodness, I loved it. It was over the top in the best possible way, and yeah, I'm definitely continuing on with this series of graphic novels. And even if you don't read a lot of them, I just think they're really smart and clever, and you'll probably connect with some of the stories as well, just like I do. So if you haven't yet checked it out, I recommend looking for it on your Hoopla app through your library. And yeah, feel free to just start with volume 4, because in my opinion, it's the best one so far. So that is it for this video. I would love to hear your comments down below. As always, recommend to me your favorite modern horror classic. So something that's newer, but still could get that classic label. As well, I would love for you to recommend your favorite horror graphic novels, because I am certainly enjoying them. And while I don't always talk about them on my channel, if they're a favorite, I do like to mention them here. As always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that little notification bell. I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.